The automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital slid open at 6:47 in the morning, and the world inside stopped. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once. Every head turned, every breath caught, every hand froze mid-motion. A coffee cup slipped from a nurse's fingers and shattered on the floor. Nobody looked down, because standing in that doorway was the largest human being any of them had ever seen. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Shoulders so broad they nearly touched both sides of the entrance frame. A face weathered and rough, like stone shaped by years of hard wind. His clothes were simple, worn jeans, a flannel shirt that must have taken half a bolt of fabric to make, boots the size of small suitcases. He moved slowly, carefully, as if he had spent his entire life learning how not to frighten people. It wasn't working. The waiting room erupted in quiet panic. A child buried her face in her mother's shoulder. An elderly man gripped his walker and wheeled backward 3 full feet. 2 orderlies near the elevator physically stepped in front of each other, unsure what they were even protecting themselves from. The giant said nothing. He simply walked to the reception desk, ducked his head beneath the hanging sign that read, "Welcome to Mercy General," and placed 2 enormous hands flat on the counter. The receptionist, a composed woman named Linda, who had worked emergencies for 19 years, stared up at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I need to speak with someone in charge," he said. His voice was low, almost gentle, like thunder heard from very far away. "Please." Dr. Nora Callahan was reviewing morning charts when her pager went off. The message from the front desk read simply, "Come to the lobby, now, please." She had learned long ago that please, in a hospital message, meant something unusual was happening. She set down her coffee, straightened her coat, and walked briskly toward the front. She turned the corner and stopped. She was a woman who prided herself on professional composure. She had delivered tragic news to hundreds of families without flinching. She had held steady through disasters, code reds, and every variety of human suffering the emergency room could produce. But she had never seen anything like the man standing in her lobby. He was looking at a framed photograph on the wall, one of those generic hospital prints, a sunrise over a quiet lake. And there was something in his expression that Nora couldn't immediately name. Something soft, something sad. "Sir," she said, approaching slowly, "I'm Dr. Callahan. How can I help you?" He turned. Up close, the sheer scale of him was almost incomprehensible. The top of Nora's head barely reached his chest. And yet his eyes, dark brown, deep-set, rimmed with exhaustion, held something she recognized immediately in her line of work. Desperation mixed with hope. "My name is Samuel Cole," he said. "I read about a little girl in the newspaper. A sick little girl named Lily. It said she needed a kidney and nobody had matched her." He paused, swallowed. "I want to be tested. I want to see if I can donate." The lobby had gone silent enough to hear the fluorescent lights hum. Nora studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Cole, do you know this child?" He looked at the floor. A shadow crossed his face. "No," he said quietly, "I don't." The story of Lily Harmon had broken Dr. Callahan's heart the first time she read the file. 7 years old, dark curly hair, eyes that were still somehow bright, despite everything her body was putting her through. Stage 4 renal failure, both kidneys compromised, on dialysis 3 times a week. Her mother, a young woman named Claire, had sat in this very hospital for 4 months, holding her daughter's hand and refusing to leave. The transplant list was long. The matches had been 0. The newspaper article had been a last resort. Claire had asked a local journalist to write the story. She had said simply, "My daughter is running out of time. If anyone out there can help, please." And somehow, impossibly, this man had seen it. Samuel Cole, a former construction worker from a small town 3 hours north. No family listed on any form. No emergency contact, just a phone number and an address on a rural route that barely existed on maps. He sat in the small consultation room now, folded almost comically into a chair clearly designed for someone a third his size. He answered every question the nursing staff asked him calmly and completely. Blood type, medical history, no chronic illness, No medications, no surgeries. Nurse Rachel Huang, 26 years old and normally unflappable, had to step out of the room twice to compose herself. She told another nurse afterward, "He kept saying the same thing every time we asked why he was doing this. He kept saying, it just felt right. It just felt like something I was supposed to do." The blood work went to the lab, and then they waited. Claire Harmon was sitting in the chair beside Lily's bed when Dr. Callahan knocked softly and entered. Lily was asleep. The machines beside her beeped in slow, steady rhythm, a sound Claire had come to both depend on and dread. "There's a man downstairs," Nora said carefully, pulling a chair close. "He came in this morning. He wants to be tested as a potential donor for Lily." Claire looked up. Her face was hollow with exhaustion, but her eyes sharpened immediately. "Who is he?" "His name is Samuel Cole. He says he saw the article." A long silence. Claire looked at her daughter. Lily's small chest rose and fell. Her curly hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo. "Is he a match?" Claire whispered. "We won't know for a few hours." "But Claire," Nora hesitated, "his blood type is compatible. It's a start." Claire pressed both hands over her mouth. She made no sound, but her shoulders shook for a long moment before she steadied herself. "Can I meet him?" she asked. The meeting happened in the corridor outside the lab. It was not a long conversation, but those who witnessed it later described it as one of the most quietly powerful things they had ever seen. Samuel stood. Claire barely came up to his elbow. She looked up at him for a moment without speaking. "Why?" she finally said. The word was raw. No other words around it. Samuel looked down at her. He turned his cap in his hands. "I lost someone a long time ago," he said. "Someone I should have been there for and wasn't. I can't fix that. But maybe I can do something here." He glanced toward the ward where Lily lay sleeping. Nobody should lose a child. Nobody should have to watch that happen and feel helpless. Claire reached up and put her hand on his enormous forearm. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true stories of courage, kindness, and the human spirit. The lab results came back at 2:14 in the afternoon. Dr. Callahan was reading through them when she noticed something. She read it again. Then a third time. She sat down. There are moments in medicine, rare, strange, borderline inexplicable moments, when the data tells a story that no one anticipated, when the science leads somewhere that feels less like biology and more like something else entirely. The compatibility markers were extraordinary. Not just compatible, nearly perfect. The kind of tissue match that typically only existed between close biological relatives. Nora picked up the file and walked slowly to the genetics counselor's office. The conversation with Samuel Cole happened. Behind a closed door, Dr. Callahan and the hospital's chief of genetics, Dr. Osei, sat across from him. Samuel's large hands rested on the table, perfectly still. They showed him the results. They explained what the numbers meant. They told him that the level of genetic compatibility they were seeing between him and Lily Harmon was not consistent with two strangers. It was consistent with a parent and child. Samuel Cole did not speak for a very long time. When he finally did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Her mother's name," he said slowly. "Claire." "What's her last name before she got married?" Nora looked at the file. "Harmon is her maiden name. She's never been married." Something in Samuel's face cracked open. Not dramatically, not in a way that made noise. It was quiet and enormous at the same time, like watching a mountain shift. "Claire Harmon," he said. "I knew a Claire Harmon 8 years ago. We were together for just a few months." She moved away. I didn't know. I never knew." He pressed one hand over his eyes. "I never knew," he repeated. The room was perfectly still. Claire was told gently, carefully, privately. She sat in the consultation room with Dr. Callahan and did not speak. For a long time after she heard, she stared at the table, then at the wall, then at her own hands. "Samuel," she said finally. "Samuel Cole." She closed her eyes. "I looked for him. When I found out I was pregnant, I looked for him. He had moved. There was no forwarding address. I thought, she stopped. I thought he just didn't want to be found. He didn't know, Nora said quietly. He didn't know, Claire repeated, as if testing the weight of those words. She wiped her eyes carefully. She took a breath. Can I see him? This meeting was not in the corridor. It was in a small private room, and Dr. Callahan left them alone. No one knows exactly what was said between Samuel Cole and Claire Harmon in those 40 minutes. When the door opened again, Claire's eyes were swollen and red. Samuel's cheeks were wet. But something had shifted between them. Some enormous painful thing had been acknowledged and laid down, and in its place was something still fragile, but no longer broken. She has my eyes, Samuel said to Dr. Callahan as he came out. His voice was rough. I saw a photo. She has my eyes. The surgery was scheduled for the following Thursday. The preparation was thorough, the medical team meticulous. Samuel underwent every test, every evaluation, every preoperative procedure without complaint. He sat in the hospital for those intervening days quietly, asking for nothing, disturbing no one, existing in that vast, careful stillness that had followed him all his life. And on Wednesday evening, the night before the surgery, Claire brought Lily to meet him. Lily had been told only that a very kind man was going to help make her better. She had been told his name was Samuel. She had not yet been told the rest. That was a story for when she was older, for when she was healthy, for a day full of light rather than the pale glow of hospital fluorescence. She walked into the room holding her mother's hand, her little hospital gown swishing around her knees, her dark, curly hair loose around her shoulders. She stopped when she saw him. Her enormous brown eyes, his eyes, unmistakably his eyes, went very wide. "You're really big," she said. Samuel laughed. It was the first time anyone in the hospital had heard him laugh, and it filled the room completely, warm and real. "I am," he agreed. Lily tilted her head. "Are you scared?" He looked at her for a long moment, at her face, which held pieces of his own, at her small, brave chin lifted toward him, at the way she stood so steady on tired, sick legs. "No," he said honestly, "not anymore." Lily walked forward and held out her hand, tiny against his when he shook it, disappearing completely when he wrapped his fingers carefully around hers. "Thank you for helping me," she said, with the grave formality of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for. Samuel's throat worked. His eyes filled. "Thank you for letting me," he said. The surgery lasted 6 hours and 40 minutes. At 3:22 in the afternoon on a Thursday in October, Dr. Nora Callahan walked into the family waiting room, and before she even said a word, her smile told the story. The transplant was successful. Lily was stable. She would recover. Claire Harmon covered her face with both hands and wept openly, surrounded by nurses who had followed this case for months and couldn't stop themselves from crying alongside her. Samuel, waking slowly from anesthesia in the recovery room down the hall, was told the news by a nurse who had to blink very hard to keep her voice professional. He turned his face toward the window. Outside, the autumn light was golden and long, falling across the rooftops of the city in the particular way it only does in October, warm and fleeting and achingly beautiful, the way all precious things are. 3 weeks later, Lily Harmon walked out of Mercy General Hospital on her own 2 feet. Samuel was there. He stood at the entrance, smaller somehow in the open air than he had seemed indoors, or perhaps just more human. Claire stood beside him. Lily ran the last few steps through the automatic doors and grabbed both their hands at once, one on each side, and pulled them forward into the light. The story doesn't end there, of course. Real stories never do. There were difficult conversations still ahead, and new arrangements to be figured out, and the long, tender work of becoming a family out of something that had been broken and lost, and found again in the most unexpected way. But in that moment, a little girl, her mother, and a father who walked into a hospital as a stranger and walked out as something else entirely in that moment, it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered that someone you loved was in desperate need? and only you could help? Share your thoughts. Your words might inspire someone else who needs to hear them today.